I finished making my QCX Plus and I made a contact. That really is rediscovering radio. In this video, I'll take a look at the QCX final build and offer a few tips I picked up on the way. I'll also look at the way I powered the QCX, and I'll show how I've set up my QRP station to get started again, celebrate my first contact and look at the next steps. So let's start with taking a look at finishing and testing the QCX Plus kit. I started my 40-meter QCX Plus and then was distracted by some other work I had to complete. So I made sure my checklist was up to date and packed the parts away in a box. Once I was able to get back to the project, I was really glad that I'd made that checklist. I was able to pick up exactly where I left off, go back to the right point in the PDF instructions and carry on soldering. Finishing was a lot quicker than I expected. As with the Mini, I used a small solder tip and some sticky flux for most of the components, and then a much larger tip for the sockets and power connector. Having already prepared and tested the coils, they were ready to solder in place, and I checked their continuity really thoroughly. The front panel was quick and easy to assemble. A tip about construction is that drilling out the spacers and plastic nuts for the LCD screen is essential for smooth fitting, as the bolts just have to slide straight through them. Remembering, of course, to leave the threads on the final 4 nuts that hold the display in place. Before putting the boards into the case, check the fit carefully on the underside. The tolerance is tight and it would be easy to create a short circuit if any leads or lugs are left uncut. I put some precautionary tape over the larger contacts. When fitting the panels of the case together, it helps to put all the screws in loosely to make sure everything fits and all the threads are started. Only when everything is roughly in place should they be gently firmed up so that it all pulls together. Having returned to the kit building process, I was soon finished and ready to try it out. To power the QCX Plus while I tested it, I used a simple plug-in power supply giving me 12 volts. I was a bit concerned that it might be noisy, but in the end that wasn't a problem. Once again, the transceiver sprung into life as soon as I switched it on, and I was able to get straight into the setting up process. To do this, I partially assembled the case but left the top off and some of the screws out for easy disassembly. Having set the display contrast, the next step was to complete the receiver alignment. There are some excellent videos about this, including a long and detailed one by Hans Summers, the brains behind the QCX series, which I followed myself. Doing this thoroughly makes a huge difference to the sensitivity of the unit, and it's worth going through at least a couple of times to check the settings. Getting the optimum RF power output can be a bit more involved, as I found with my QCX Mini on 20 meters. But by following the recommended method of adjusting the coil spacing, I increased the output by about 20%. To do this, I connected the output to my dummy load and then fed the power back to the onboard header, which enables you to check the power through the LCD display. With 12 volt supply, I immediately saw a power output of just over 4 watts. I had already prepared the coils so that they could be spread or compressed easily, and especially by pushing the turns of L2 together, I saw this rating move up to just over 5 watts, a really healthy power output. The most exciting part of this process for me was that I unexpectedly made my first radio contact in over 40 years. I had just finished aligning the receiver and I had a horribly mismatched unantenna with the receiving wire just dropped out of the window when I heard a CQ from ON4LAE in Belgium. Not expecting anything to happen and with a terrible side tone noise in my headphones, I answered him, and to my amazement he responded. I felt quite emotional for a moment, as this was the first time I had heard my call sign come back to me over the air since I was a teenager. I also had a moment of panic as I then had to remember what to do and what to say and in what order to say it using my improving but still rusty Morse code. I'm glad to say it all worked out well, and if you ever see this, Georges in Belgium, I am very grateful to you for making my first new contact so easy. From the QRP perspective, I'm really pleased too. This was before I had adjusted the RF output, so nominally around 4 watts was available, which isn't much, but I think only a small amount of this actually reached my antenna. This is the aspect of radio I find most interesting, and I'm now reacquainting myself with propagation and all those kinds of things on the various HF bands. I've decided for the moment to stick with these small home-assembled QRP devices. It's really interesting and takes some patience and skill to make contacts, especially over some distance. One question that I have asked myself though is, what's the best way to power a QCX, both at home and when mobile, so I tried some experiments. I looked around for a decent quality plug-in power supply. Many of them are poorly made, noisy and even dangerous, but I've found a model that I've been using on some of my Arduino projects and they seem pretty good, as well as staying cool. With the QCX, so far it's been fine. I also made myself a battery box with 8 AA batteries and a switch, and this is fine for listening, but for transmitting they simply cannot give enough power, even though the specifications suggest that they possibly could. I also tried using Eneloop rechargeable batteries, which also are fairly highly specified, but they couldn't cope with the power load either. My next idea was to use a 3S LiPo battery from one of my quadcopters. This has a voltage range between 10.5 and 12.6 volts, and I found that it worked really well. So my next step will be to make this into a safe battery box with appropriate connectors and switch. I'm also going to use a simple experimental antenna setup for the moment, while I make a decision about setting up a more permanent long wire. I'm in no hurry and I want to get this right, including for when I go mobile. If you've thought about making a kit from QCX Labs, then I really recommend just going ahead. These are really great products. They are brilliantly thought through and designed, they have superb instructions, and they are very fairly priced. So for me, my journey back to rediscovering radio is not exactly finished, but I have reached the major milestone of making a contact. I'm really pleased about that, and I hope you've enjoyed coming along with me on the journey. I hope soon to be getting out and trying my newly completed radio station, G4BSK, and I may even do that on my bike. I was first licensed on December the 21st, 1972, so it's been a while. And I also hope to be completing some more of the radio projects I've been talking about in these videos. I've got lots of other projects on the go and still uncompleted, as I've mentioned in previous videos, and I'll be getting on with these soon and making videos about them. So I hope you'll join me again. Thanks for watching.